Oh, welcome back! You're just in time to join me for another HB game. This time I'll be featuring a different HB deck, one that was inspired by the recently concluded World's 2017 Championships. This inspiration drew from the final, where Wilfie 2.0 went ham. That Byroy going crazy. For those of you who missed it or did not watch it, here's what happened. Wilfie was playing his CI versus Greg's Haley. Sure, everyone remembered that Greg basically outright lost the game because of scarcity lock. However, what really struck me was one of the big combo turns that Wilfie pulled off, even though his deck wasn't made to be a combo deck at all. Let's take a look at this combo in action. I really love it. So, Wilfie starts his turn with 3 clicks, and before I begin explaining this crazy turn, for those of you who are thinking, wow, this is so degenerate, CI and stuff, you must keep in mind that prior to this, Haley didn't make many meaningful runs. He wasn't interacting with the core at all. So Wilfie was able to assemble a very strong board state without the runner bothering to contest it, consisting of a Res Jeeves, an MCA austerity policy with 2 counters on it. The runner didn't bother to run to trash it. And there's another card installed in remote that we'll get to later. So Wilfie starts his turn with the standard 3 clicks. First click, he charges the MCA austerity, bringing it to 3 counters, which allows him to then pop it on the second click to gain 4 more clicks. And then he spends the remaining clicks to install an efficiency committee, placing 4 advancement counters on it and scoring it. Because he advanced the agenda 3 times, it triggers Jeeves, allowing him to end off with an extra click. Using this extra click, Wilfie was able to then liberate the rest of the clicks of the just scored efficiency committee, putting him at 4 clicks, one of which he used to click an MC austerity policy that was already on the table. There was a second one that the runner did not bother running, and yeah, he just managed to click it up. And with the remaining 3 clicks, Wilfie basically had free reign. He was able to do everything he wanted to do. With these 3 clicks, it's as though he hasn't taken his turn yet, but in actual fact, he has just done a huge combo that allowed him to score 2 points off the table. The amazing thing about this is that because the runner further dug themselves into the hole by ending their turn on only 2 credits below the Brian Stinson threshold, Wilfie was then able to ice HQ in preparation for them playing Stinson Hedge into Stinson VLC, gaining him a grand total of 17 credits and drawing 4 more cards, with the runner unable to steal any of them which are agendas because he just iced HQ. So this massive combo turn, consisting of 14 clicks taken in a single turn, sounds utterly degenerate, but really it was just Wilfie playing very well and the runner just not providing the correct amount of aggression to contest the core. It wasn't even like a standard CI combo where you accelerated diagnostics and mill your deck and everything. It was just Wilfie planning out his turn really well. He played this turn perfectly and basically exploited this huge window that the runner gave him. So very well played, and that's why Wilfie ended up moving on to win the tournament. So I was very inspired by this, and like, I want to make such a 14 click turn myself. This looks amazing. MCA and Jeeves are both very good cards. Let's see how we can make that work. Except that CI, not very interested in playing CI. Let's play Architects of Tomorrow instead. So the core remains the same. We are playing click gain cards, MC Austerity, Jeeves, Efficiency Committee, all of them, and we're gonna protect them using our very taxing ice. CI doesn't really want to spend money on ice because they go poor, as we mentioned in the previous CI video, so why not play Architects of Tomorrow instead, which gives you a discount on your Bioroid ice, which are taxing to begin with. So that's the beginning. That's basically the core of this deck. If they do run through your ice to trash your win condition in your click gaining assets, well, you're not too sad about it because you get to res your other ice at a discount. Architects of Tomorrow come into play right there. So that's the basis of this deck. Let's look at a couple of the interesting cards. Tithonium is one of the interesting influence spends here. It's basically the only barrier in the deck. It serves to gear check the runner, make sure they get the paperclip out. The problem with barriers is that there are generally no good barriers. With Eli 1.0 out of the picture, I just don't see myself playing any other barriers. So unfortunately, the best we have is Tithonium. Yeah, and if the runner actually manages to install that paperclip, we are probably not going to res the Titanium, but otherwise it's a good way to force the gear check. It also punishes people who only run one paperclip and are greedy enough to put it in the bin against HB. With Arc Lockdown in the deck as well, they could be severely punished for this. And as for most of the other runners, they might think they're safe running into barriers because there isn't the Chiashi threat like in Jinteki, but they're gonna be shocked by this Titanium. So yeah, I always love my one-off Titanium in HB. Best defense and Arc Lockdown are tech cards against fast advanced tech, in other words, Clot. Sacrificial Construct's the bane of this deck because it prevents fast advance with Clot on the table, and it makes the runner big cash when they have Tapworm. If the runner's rich, you lose because your Bioroids do nothing. So that is where you don't want to be. This is why we need to kill Tapworms, Sackcons, and Clots ASAP. Yep. And finally, we have Marcus Betty versus Chrysium Grid. I went for Marcus Betty in the end as the defensive upgrade of choice, but they're both very close. They're mainly there to protect centrals. You don't really need to protect remotes because ideally you should either be jamming agendas because the runner can't be bothered to check all of them, or you should be fast advancing them from hand. So there's really no need to create a strong vertical remote, which means you can dedicate most of your heavy defenses, your Fairchild 3s, your big Fairchild, and your defensive upgrades to centrals. This is very different from a traditional HB deck where your remote is generally the most well defended. You can't really afford to do that nowadays because runners central pressure is too good, and you don't really need a Fairchild 3 on a remote anyway. If they are trashing your MC austerities, you're probably winning anyway because it's so expensive to do so. So I chose Marcus Betty because it's less expensive overall. It gets around political operative as long as they don't have interdiction, and it is potentially more impactful, especially if you get to fire off the Tithonium subroutine with it. You get to trash a resource, which is really cool. You do have to win a side game, unfortunately, but otherwise it's one of the strongest defensive upgrades there are in the game right now. And well, I had excess influence. Speaking of influence, I really couldn't find any way to spend the last 2 pips on influence. In fact, in the earlier iteration when the upgrades were Chrysium Grids, I had basically 6 influence hanging. There really is literally nothing to spend on. I would like to spend it on global foods, but I've already used my restricted slot on Fairchild 3. There are no other assets I'd rather have. These are the perfect ones for this deck, and there are no other better operations to have. Hedgefund and IPO are the best burst economy you're going to get, and yeah, Marilyn and Adonis are the best asset economy you're going to get. As for the ice, there are a bunch of ice that I like, but the thing is, because we're playing Architects of Tomorrow, we need lots of Bioroid ice, so, by virtue of that, most of ice is going to come from within faction. Really, even though we are constrained by the 12 influence limit, realistically, I don't need the extra influence. Let's play a 10 influence HB. Today we are playing against Haley, and as you see, I'm going to mulligan my hand here. It doesn't have anything of much value in it apart from a Jeeves, which isn't going to do that much early on. Against Haley, which is not as aggressive as say a Gabriel Santiago or an Omar Kyung, you don't really need central ice early on. Instead, what you want to see, as with most asset spam decks, are your assets. You need to get your assets going, and unlike traditional asset spam decks, you actually want to see some ice for your remotes, those small ice, your Fairchilds 1 and 2. That will make your assets very taxing to trash. My new hand is marginally better than the other one. It doesn't have the efficiency committee, so that's one less agenda to worry about. But there's no valuable asset, no DBS, no campaigns. Those are what I want to see. So unfortunately, I'd make do with installing a G's first click, and then icing up R&D just to deter any opening indexings. My opponent makes a run on HQ first click, seeing the Arc Lockdown, and then runs the Jeeves. Very interesting play here. My opponent trashes the Jeeves. I definitely did not expect my opponent to spend all their money, all their opening money on trashing the Jeeves, but when they followed up with Sackcon and Tapworm, it made so much more sense. My opponent did not want me to have Jeeves because if they left the Jeeves up, I would have res the Jeeves, purged virus counters, and had a click spare to do whatever I wanted. That's too much efficiency for me. So actually a very good decision to trash the G's on my opponent's part, even though it seems like bankrupting yourself isn't a wise idea at all. So yeah, I had to hem and haw for quite a bit right here because I did not know what to do. I originally intended to cred IPO, but with Sackcon and Tapworm out, IPOing is only beneficial for my opponent, so I had to make do with the purge here. I wasn't in any hurry to get ice or assets down, so spending my entire turn to purge isn't the worst, except that my opponent finds the second Sackcon. What am I to do here? Do I really commit my next 2 turns to purging? This seems very subpar. I don't know. With 2 fetch out 3s and a fetch out 2 in my hand, I decide, okay, let's try to set my opponent's tempo using another method. Why not I create a remote here and dare them to run through it? This might be a Vitruvius that you're missing out on. You better check it. And it's probably a Bioroid guarding the ice, so you can definitely run through it, sure. But nope, my opponent doesn't take the bait. Instead, they're gonna set themselves up with a piece in our time. This is a huge setup card, not just for them, but for me as well. Unfortunately, this helps them. I wanted to remain low on credits to dodge the Tapworm triggers, but now I can't because my opponent forced me into the 12 credit range. So what could I do here? I'm gonna give 2 credits a turn to my opponent. That can't do, but fortunately for me, I drew a second copy of G's Model Bioroids. I think I'm only running 2 copies, so this is my last one. Pretty happy I drew it because this will help me clear the Tapworm from the board, because purging allows me to then, I won't purge and not make any headway. So as you see here on my turn, I'm able to rest Jeeves, purge the Tapworm, and still have a click spare to do whatever I want. In this case, jam the Vitruvius behind the fetch out too. Now, I know it seems really questionable. Yeah, does gaining that extra click from purging really help your game? And trust me, it really does a lot. Because this gives me the flexibility next turn to either quadruple advance the Vitruvius or to continue purging the Tapworm off my opponent's table. So it really isn't about just gaining an extra click. It really is gaining extra flexibility as well and allowing plays such as this where the extra click allows you to install an agenda that you so badly need to get rid from your hand. So my turn here was to purge once more to get rid of the Tapworm. My opponent did not run my face down Vitruvius, so I assume they won't be running it next turn either. Since it doesn't matter either way, I might as well get rid of the Tapworm as soon as possible to prevent my opponent from gaining more economy. Then I followed up with an IPO, which I can finally do without worrying about my opponent gaining money through Tapworm. Sure, they still have Beth, Curie, and Chang, but Beth gains are not nearly as good as Tapworm. Unless my opponent's gaining extra clicks from Beth. That's really good. So, my opponent indexes 3rd click, but by now I've gained enough money through my opponent's piece in our time, helping me a lot, so I'm able to afford to res my R&D ice despite being under employee strike. Fetch out 3 on the outside, Ravana on the inside. Just to recap, I know it's very confusing because I'm running the full fetch out suite. It can be very confusing following which fetch outs are which. R&D fetch out is fetch out 3, as is the fetch out protecting Jeeves. You'll notice I have the Batty under the fetch out 3 on Jeeves as well because I need to fire a meaningful subroutine, and that's the end run or 1 brain damage on the fetch out 3. Protecting my Vitruvius is a fetch out 2. It doesn't end the run at all, and I was happy to concede the agenda to my opponent if they ran it. The whole point was to perhaps get Architects of Tomorrow trigger if they decide to run my fetch out 2. Of course, that's not relevant here because E-Strike's active. I don't think it was active when I installed the Vitruvius, so yeah. So, judging by my opponent's reaction here, they did not make another run on R&D, which means there are no more agendas on the top of my R&D. Their indexing was unsuccessful. So I'm going to continue on here with a triple advanced Vitruvius and install a new item in the remote, hopefully to bait a run from my opponent. This, if my opponent falls for the bait, I'm going to gain in 2 ways. Firstly, I'm going to get a free Architects of Tomorrow trigger, which will give me a discount on my fetch out 3 that is on the G's. And secondly, they would be beta into running the Marilyn for no benefit. But they weren't beta into running it, so I'm going to rest the Marilyn anyway. Click 1 draw knowing that's not agenda, and I see the MC austerity policy. My opponent knew just as well that it would be there. So here's one really beautiful thing I did. I overrode the Marilyn campaign and clicked up the MC austerity with my final click. So this is the beautiful thing about Marilyn campaign. The moment you res it at the start of your turn, you are not losing money. You pay 2 to res it, but you gain the 2 back. So no harm done in overwriting the campaign. What's more, it's shuffled back into my deck, which reduces the R&D agenda density, gives me another shot at drawing the Marillion campaign for more money, and most importantly, negating the indexing earlier. You notice that by shuffling my deck, the indexing was neutered, so my R&D is live again. I knew that my opponent could get into R&D again with a same old indexing, which is obviously a risk. But here the hope is if they go for that, they can't really contest my MC austerity policy, and that will lead me to gain even more. So they are really forked in 2 ways. I still think an indexing was correct here, but since they chose not to, I now have the privilege of scoring this Vitruvius, which I will happily do, given my opponent has no clot threat. Very important thing to maintain if you are playing Shaper. So here I'm a bit troubled. I have an extra click here after using MC Austerity and Jeeves. I quadruple advance my Vitruvius, so now I have to ask myself, do I want 1 advancement or 2 advancement counter? Sorry, 1 or 2 agenda counters on the Vitruvius. 2 seems a bit overkill. There's not that many things I really want to recur from archives. I could use the last click for some more useful things, such as IPO. Not really. I don't want to play IPO here. If I do, I'll be on 15 credits, which gives my opponent an extra click. We don't want that. So instead, I'm going to play Arc Lockdown and remove Employee Strike from the game. I'm sort of okay with my opponent using same old indexing because they have no agendas yet. I don't have to worry about R&D pressure that much. What I'm more worried about is my opponent neutering my ID ability because I'm pretty reliant on it for economy. And this is a juncture where my ID ability really starts to shine against exploitative Haley, should I call it. Exploitative Haley exploits the corp's richness to gain benefits. Tapworm makes more money the richer the corp is, and Beth gives more benefits the richer the corp is as well. But playing Architects of Tomorrow, I can actually stay on a relatively low credit level because I get to res my ice for free, essentially. As you saw here, my opponent indexes into R&D but gives me a free Fetch Out 3 res instead. And they don't even get anything to show for it because once again, R&D comes up short. There's no agendas. Oh dear, what are they to do? This is really unlucky. 2 indexings. Both whiffed. Unfortunate. They accessed the last card in my hand, but it's irrelevant. I'm not going to play this IPO. I'm not going to give you any more Beth benefits. I don't even need to, because what else do I have left to rest? I can stay on 7 credits. So now my objective shifts to winning the game. This easier said than done, considering that the next 5 cards on R&D, now 4 cards on R&D, are non-agendas. I need to think and plan ahead on how to set up my win condition. So obviously the win condition is to score a 3-pointer, and that can be done with MC Austerity Policy. So I immediately fetch the MCA that I just used to score the Vitruvius, using the said Vitruvius counter, and I start making it go to work. Now my opponent is under MCA influence once again. 3 clicks to their turn, not much they can do. They need to contest this MCA Austerity Policy, but can they? We'll see. So they drop a diesel, they drop an SMC, and keep going on. Meanwhile, I know that the next few cards on top of R&D are still locked by indexing. So obviously next turn, I'm going to start drawing through it to find my agendas. Hey, it's aggression time! My opponent finally decides to challenge my remote. Okay, they know that they can't let the MCA just tick down like that. Very well. Alright, so it's a lose-lose situation for them. If they don't contest it, they're gonna have 3-click turns for the rest of the game. If they do as they do here, well, sure, they're gonna get past the remote. It's simply Fetch Out 1 into Fetch Out 2. They have their Guardian Blade, they have the money, they can easily contest this remote. But at what cost? I only spent 1 credit resing the entire remote thanks to Architect's ability. The inner Fetch Out 2 was free. In exchange, I forced my opponent to spend 6 credits on breaking these ice. 2 for the Fetch Out 1, 4 for the Fetch Out 2, 3 to kill the MCA Austerity. Total of 9 credits down the drain just like that. Well, pretty good trade for me, considering I only had to pay 1 credit to res both ice. So yeah, this is what this deck does. It's not asset spam. I cannot blindly just throw an MC Austerity out in the open and expect it to live for 3 turns. However, in conjunction with the taxing and cheap ice from Bioroids, I should say, in conjunction with Architects of Tomorrow, I can easily do something like this and have my opponent pay the price for it. So as I promised in my earlier turn, I was going to draw 3 times this turn and use the extra G's click to do something. But on my second draw, on my first draw, my first click draw, I found the MC Austerity Policy sitting there from the indexing. That was just inviting me to spend my remaining 2 clicks to do the same thing again. Drop it, click it up once. Can my opponent run it again? Are they gonna pay 9 credits to deny me yet another Austerity Policy? I think they can't. So they go for the Jeeves instead, because they see that the Jeeves is the way I score my 5-3 agenda. It gives me an extra click, meaning that my score plan goes live 1 turn earlier. So they tried to contest the Jeeves, but sadly enough, my opponent did not account the fact that there was an upgrade in the server. Whichever upgrade was going to be, it wasn't going to be good for them. Ash would have been bad, and in this case, it was Batty, sorry. So all I had to do was to bid 1. They were on 5 credits when they ran, so they had no chance of trashing the G's at all. I lost my Batty there, but if they wanted to contest my G's again, they had to spend another turn getting it, which they won't because they're so poor. So, on to me, I actually can score out now and win the game with a 5-3, except that I don't have a 5-3 in hand. So this is where the Daily Business Show comes in to try to filter out the 5-3 into my hand without it staying in my hand, because HQ is pretty vulnerable right now. And yes, MC Austerity is parked there at 3 counters. I want it to stay alive, so a very smart thing for my opponent to do would be to run that remote and trash the MC Austerity right now. But as mentioned, they need 9 credits to do this, which would open up a big scoring window. My opponent just isn't rich enough. You notice that all the early turns of purging Tatworm has massively paid off for me. Without a Tatworm, my opponent just has no leverage on this game at all. They have no economy. They've used up all their peace in our times. They are forced to click for credits. The Beth is paying out somewhat, but it's not as much as my opponent would like. So yeah, that is pretty good for me. So yeah, now it all comes down to whether I can find this elective upgrade before my opponent does. I cannot take too long, because once they get enough money, they can go back into R&D for another indexing to delay me further. So, my opponent does some shenanigans here and decides to use the SMC to install Nanot K outside of a run. I'm not sure, but turns out they actually had Clot in their hand, which was why they made that move to free up the memory so that they could drop the Clot from their hand. So if I drew an elective upgrade here, that would have been game, but instead all I see is a sales team. I have to ask myself, do I want to spend the MC Austerity Policy to score a sales team here? And the answer was very clearly no, not interested. I'm gonna draw manually for my elective upgrade. So draw, triggering G's, 1 extra click. I see a Fairchild 4. This goes on R&D. Probably not gonna reset this game, but if they ever run my MC Austerity or my Jeeves to deny me the Fast Advance 5-3, guess what? I'm gonna be able to res the Fairchild 4 for just 4 credits on R&D. This basically ups the tax factor on R&D by a lot. They have to pay an extra 7 credits for their Guardian Blade to get up to strength and break the 4 subroutine, so I'm very happy about that. Clock comes down, and there's the elective upgrade, just 1 turn shy. I can't fast advance it this turn, so I've got to purge. But again, with Jeeves up, giving me so much efficiency, I get the extra click, which I can then use to drop something on the table. How about this? Maryland campaign, giving me more money in the remote. My opponent has no time to check it. Alternatively, I could have clicked up the MC Austerity as well to force my opponent to lose an extra click. Both ways, it would have worked just fine. I think clicking on the Austerity might have been better, considering that I drew my 3rd one in hand anyway. So they trash the DBS, but little do they know I've already found my agenda. So I purge again and spend my last click gaining credit. Again, I should be clicking up the MC Austerity, but no big difference here. I was probably going to win anyway. My opponent had no money at all. They couldn't contest my remotes, let alone get to my elective upgrade, which I scored finally for the game. So I think this game clearly illustrates how you can fork the runner into a very bad position. You place something behind ice and you challenge them. Do you run it or not? If you don't, well, they could be agendas that I'm jamming through, and if it's an MC austerity that you're not running, you only get 3 clicks a turn. If you do run it, however, you lose tempo, and it may be a Marilyn I'm just baiting you into. Moreover, I'm gaining tempo with my ID ability. By forcing it to run my remotes, I get to res my ice for cheap. It's a win-win for me. And this is the beauty of this deck. You get to make fun plays such as this. Unfortunately, I did not manage to showcase everything this deck has to offer. So if you do decide to give it a whirl yourself, take note of these things. Economy assets are huge. I didn't draw that many of them this game. The Marilyns came a bit late, but if they do come, they really smoothen out your opening and allow you to score out that much faster. I was pretty slow this game. But I did manage to showcase the Marilyn trick where you overwrite it with a new Never Advance card and force the runner to make decisions on whether to run it or not. The objective is really not to have your economy assets hog a remote, which is why I run Marilyn campaign over something like a pad campaign. You need to force as many decisions on the runner as possible, poor lose-lose decisions for them, and yeah, that's the whole trick of this deck. DBS is another powerful card that is worth hogging a remote for. By filtering through your deck, you can find exactly what you need quicker. If I had a DBS up, I would have scored my elective upgrade way sooner. It wasn't until the late game that I drew my first copy, so yeah, there you go. Same thing with Best Defense. It didn't show out this game at all, even though I'm running 2 copies, and it certainly would have smoothened out my opening because of the Tapworm Sackcon combo. Having to purge so many times early game really made this game draw out much longer than it should have. With the tech in there, this would have been way easier to deal with. With all that being said, even though I didn't get to pull off some crazy 14-click Wilfy turn combo-tastic, well, at least we managed to make the runner really poor just by using the power of the Fair Children Ice. Turns out, there are still a lot of runners who are not prepared for such a glacial, never advance onslaught. Keep jamming, keep slamming. In the meantime, thanks for watching Happy Net Running. See you next time.